Well, as the Sooners look to rebound from their first loss of the Brent Venables era, they make the short road trip down to Fort Worth, where they will face off with TCU at Amon G. Carter Stadium, 11 a.m. kickoff this Saturday. And to preview the matchup with the Horned Frogs, we welcome in our counterpart from the TCU side, HornedFrogBlitz.com on the 24/7 Sports Network, Jeremy Clark. Jeremy, very much appreciate your time. And I feel like the natural place to start here is the turnover this past offseason within the coaching staff. Sonny Dykes comes over from SMU, brings a large portion of his former staff at SMU with him to TCU, not the least of whom is offensive coordinator Garrett Riley. That's obviously a name with which Oklahoma fans are at least tangentially familiar. So obviously the Frogs are 3-0. To start year one under Sonny Dykes. But what have been some of the hallmarks of this new program, both on the field and off, under the direction of Dykes?
Well, I think the big thing is players just buying in such a short amount of time, Parker. I think if you go back, and I've teased a lot of people about this, made jokes about it. When you look at what Sonny Dykes has done in just such a short amount of time, just from making things enjoyable, from a media perspective, he opens up everything to the media. There's been some close practices, of course, but he's more open. We get to interview players, we get to interview coaches, not just assistant coaches. We get to actually interview position coaches. And I've joked around, said Dykes got a sheet of paper one day and was given a list of things Gary Patterson didn't do that the fans didn't like. And he just did all the opposite. He's just done everything in that way. And I think the biggest thing when I look at what he's been able to do and his staff's been able to do in this day and age of transfer portal, everyone leaves, they're not happy, playing time, whatever it is. They go through spring ball at the end of spring camp. They had one guy hit the transfer portal. So that tells me something. That tells me that the players are buying in. Senior leaders, guys that have been around the program for 5 years, have all spoke volumes about Sonny Dykes and the way he cares. Coach Kazadi, Coach Kaz, the strength and conditioning coach, which everyone knows is pretty much the face of the program now because he's transformed the players and into such a different physicality than what they were previously. So a lot of great things going on. Obviously 3-0, winning helps. And if they start to lose, maybe you start to see some of these things change a little bit. But right now, everything seems to be going in the right direction.
So Chandler Morris gets the first shot to be TCU's starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. He gets injured in the season opener against Colorado. Max Duggan takes over, and man, he really has seized the bull by the horns. What can you say about the play of the senior quarterback from the state of Iowa?
Man, I'll be honest with you. I've been around Max for a very long time, and the last two games are probably the top two games I've seen him play. Now, we all know Max has made tremendous plays throughout his career. And what I told someone last week is when you think of Max Duggan highlights, what are they usually highlights of? They're him running out of the pocket, making long runs with his feet, breaking tackles. You didn't really see a whole lot of those highlights coming with him through the air. The last two games, I'll be honest, he's thrown better than I've ever seen him throw. He's always had a strong arm, but the accuracy wasn't always there. The ball placement wasn't there. The just touch on the passes wasn't always there. And that's something that we've seen the last two ball games, that just throws that he wasn't able to make. And you don't know if you give all of that credit to Sonny Dykes and Garrett Riley. You know, you call Sonny Dykes the quarterback whisperer. Wherever he goes, quarterbacks seem to have success. But it was a really, really tough battle going in through spring camp, through fall camp. And that's why we didn't get to know who the starting quarterback was going to be until maybe a day or two before the season opener against Colorado, because they were so close comparably, him and Chandler Morris. I think Chandler was just maybe a little bit more consistent through fall camp. But the way Max has played, I'm really happy for him, because I know a lot of the TCU fan base was kind of down on him. They all saw what kind of bad plays he was making. But if he continues to make the throws like he's making through the two games he's played in this year, I think they could be really, really successful. I couldn't imagine, and this isn't a knock on Max whatsoever, but I couldn't imagine just looking up and seeing the leaders in passing efficiency and his name being top of the list, or even third in completion percentage. That's where he sits right now, and he's just really playing at a high level.
Certainly. And you flip things over to the other side of the football. And for so many years under Gary Patterson, TCU fans and really the rest of the college football world became so acquainted with that unique defensive scheme. How has that evolved under the new regime? What does it look like personnel-wise? And how has TCU looked to the naked eye as a defensive team through 3 games?
Well, it's funny about going from a 4-2-5 to a 3-3-5 because TCU has been known to be kind of a program under Gary Patterson with strong defensive end play, strong defensive line play. And typically if you have a strong defensive line, the rest of the defense is going to be very good. Well, we always judged how good the defensive line was based on the number of sacks for TCU. Through 3 games, there's only been 1 sack from a defensive lineman so far. So it's very different. But you get more plays from the linebackers. Those defensive linemen have done really well against the run so far. Dylan Horton, which was more of a pass rush specialist under Gary Patterson, he's more of a run stopper now. And that's the same thing with Terrell Cooper. Terrell Cooper was actually a nose tackle in that 4-2-5. Now he's a defensive end. So as we move forward, you're going to see them start to recruit more of the 6'5", 260-pound body types instead of the 6'3", 220-pound types that they could add some weight to and still maintain that speed and let them get to the quarterback. So I've told a lot of people, I think by the time you look at the stat line at the end of the year, you're probably going to have a linebacker that's going to lead the team in sacks, and that's where it currently sits right now. I think D. Winters has 1.5 sacks. So I think it allows them to make more plays from a linebacker perspective. And Joe Gillespie's known to dial up a lot of different blitz packages from those linebackers. They got extremely athletic linebackers that he's allowed to do those things with. And I think right now that's the biggest change. And what I've noticed personally compared to the last few years, especially last year, because last year, I'll just rip the Band-Aid off. That was the worst TCU defense I've seen in my 17 years covering the program. It was horrible. They gave up so many long plays, could not stop the run. SMU last year under Doxson Riley rushed for 350 against them. So that was pretty bad. This year, they're getting to the ball. They have headhunters. They're all getting to the ball. There's a swarm of them. There's not just one guy trying to make the tackle. They've set themselves up pretty well to where they can have 2 or 3 guys around the ball at all times.
Now, you talked about Joe Gillespie, and when he was on staff at Tulsa, went head-to-head twice with new Oklahoma quarterback Dylan Gabriel, who was obviously then at UCF. But as we shift our focus specifically to the matchup this weekend between TCU and Oklahoma, give me one area of strength that you perceive for TCU and one vulnerability, both sides of the coin.
Well, I think offensively, I think TCU has shown a tendency to be pretty balanced. Can they put it together in one game? We've yet to see that. One game they're throwing for a lot of yards. One game they're rushing for a lot of yards. I think against SMU, it was getting closer to being more balanced. I think Max ended up throwing for 278, and they ended up having over 230 yards on the ground. So it was more balanced, but I think that's the dynamic with this offense because they have such a strong running back core with Kendre Miller, Amari DeMarcado, and Amani Bailey. But the way Max has produced through the air and all those talented receivers they have, I think that gives their offense a chance. Okay. Defensively, I'm worried sick that they're going to give up 3rd down plays. I mean, against SMU, they gave up a ton of 3rd down conversions. And I'm not only talking these 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 opportunities. They're giving up 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10. Gave up, I think, 3 of 3 4th down conversions. But it's a bend, don't break defense. It's really weird because they give up some yards. They give up some big plays. But somehow or another, you look up, and they're still doing pretty well on the scoreboard. They gave up a ton of yards to Tanner Mordecai last week, but I think a bulk of those yards came late in the 3rd quarter, basically all the 4th quarter. I know one of those drives was 75 yards toward the end, and TCU was protecting a 2-touchdown lead. So I think consistency is a big thing for them on defense, creating turnovers. They've got 4 takeaways. But if you go back to those games, you mentioned Tulsa and UCF when Dylan Gabriel was there. Go back and look at the halftime adjustments from the 2020 game and the 2019 game. In those 2 games between Tulsa and UCF, Tulsa won both those games. The second half of both of those games, 2019, UCF scores 3 points. The second half of 2020, UCF scores 3 points. So Joe Gillespie does a good job of making adjustments at halftime to slow down Dylan Gabriel. I think that's a thing people don't really look at. when looking at this matchup. Joe Gillespie knows Dylan Gabriel's tendencies.
Now, you talked about the inability to get off the field on third down defensively for TCU. That's kind of become a bugaboo for Oklahoma as well. But then on the flip side, you mentioned the halftime adjustments and how Gillespie and company have been able to shut down Gabriel in the second half both times they've seen him previously. I'm curious, Jeremy, give me your prediction for Saturday. How do you think this one plays out? Because I see a compelling case for a shootout. I see a compelling case for a stalemate. What do you think?
Well, I've gone back and forth with my predictions. I think TCU's offense is better set up this year to compete with Oklahoma. I think last year their offense was decent. Max Duggan had one of his better games of his career in Norman last year, threw for 346. Quentin Johnston had a big game. That's the key right here. Quentin Johnston has not had the season that we all thought he would have. He only has 8 catches. In those 2 games that Max Duggan has started, he only has 5 catches for 29 yards. So my big thing for them, if they can go head to head with Oklahoma offensively and just play that bend, don't break defense. The big thing that I like about this matchup for TCU, Kansas State gave a lot of teams a blueprint on how to beat Oklahoma. And guess what? Adrian Martinez is a really fast quarterback. Guess who's faster? Max Duggan. Max Duggan, if anyone can say anything about Max Duggan, they know he is a very fast quarterback. So I look for Max Duggan to utilize his legs a little bit more this week. And even if he gets tired, they've got Sam Jackson. Sam Jackson is – a lot of people are starting to whisper, man, he's a lot like Trevon Boykin in his athleticism. And we saw him against Tarleton. We saw him against Colorado make some plays with his feet. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they bring him in some sort of package just to get his running ability going. But if they can do those 2 things and not just completely give up big play after big play after big play like they did last year in Norman, this is a game I think TCU can win. I'm predicting an upset. I think this is the measuring stick game that they need. I think TCU is going to win this game 41-37.
Jeremy Clark.
Don't hate me, Sooner fans. Don't hate me, Sooner fans. It's just my humble opinion.
Trust me, Jeremy, after what's transpired the last few days, you're probably very far down the list of people that Sooner fans hate right now, even for that prediction. Go. Jeremy Clark, HornedFrogBlitz.com. Jeremy, very much appreciate your time. Thanks for breaking down this matchup with us.
Hey, thanks, Parker.